Another point that the book by Bradley brings up, which is really interesting, is that one of the reasons why this idea of a lost opportunity exists is because of the way that people have remembered, or better to say, haven't remembered, what was actually happening back in 1945 and 1946. The great example of this that he has comes from the book by a guy by the name of Archimedes Paddy, who was an OSS officer who was in Hanoi, I believe, in 1945 when the Viet Minh took over, and he was there at other times. He met with Ho Chi Minh and Von Nguyen Giap and other people like that, and he wrote a book about that time period in 1980 after the Vietnam War had ended. And in that book, he remembered things in one way, but Bradley found the actual documents or letters or missives that he wrote during 1945 and 1946, and the way that he wrote about them at that time was very different. Let me show you an example. Like I had Patty's book here. Hold on a second, I gotta get it. Just wait. I got the book. Okay, so in his later memoir, I believe it was published in 1980, Archimedes Paddy wrote about a meeting that took place on August 27th, 1945, between Von Nguyen Giap and a representative of the French government, Jean Santany. And in his book, this is what Archimedes Paddy wrote. He said, despite his efforts to appear civil, he, meaning Jean Santany, set the tone by cutting Giap short with a paternal lecture. Giap, in perfect French and with absolute self-control, said he had not come to be lectured. For the first time in his life, Santany was meeting face-to-face a Vietnamese who dared to stand up to a Frenchman. Santany had been outplayed and was visibly annoyed. So that was written 40, 50, 60, 70, over 35 years after the event. As I said, Bradley went and found some of the actual writings from this period, and what Paddy wrote at that time was very different. He sent a cable back reporting on this meeting, and in 1945 he wrote the following. He said, "Was apparent from the start that French had upper hand and that during the course of negotiations Annamites lost considerable ground, mainly due to their inferiority complex when confronted by a European." Wow, that is a very different explanation of what happened than what Paddy wrote many years later. And this is another reason why this idea of a lost opportunity exists, because some of the things that people have said about it or remembered about it are radically different from what they actually experienced at the time. And we can go into, there's obviously many reasons why this happened, but basically this moment of 1945 into 1946, when there was contact between Ho Chi Minh and his government and the US government, is a moment that has been used for all kinds of political purposes by people who have all kinds of different ideological purposes or objectives. But the true history of it is very, very complex, and I've pointed out some of the aspects of it by basically referring to scholarship that's already been done on it, but there's much more that we could learn about it. And ultimately, by learning about the complexity of the past, we get to really a place where we can't make these judgments or ideological statements anymore, because ultimately the past is just as complex as the present, and people struggled through the present in the past just as we struggle through the present in the present. Did that make any sense? I have no idea.
Great.